So Christians can absolutely get it wrong, and do. They can follow the wrong path. They can be mistaken. They can be silly and profane. They can commit the worst sins imaginable. The one thing they cannot do is be afraid.
That's right.
Period. And so boldness, again, is not just this added extra. It's a baseline requirement for following the gospel. And if you're not doing that, you're not doing it right. Okay? So that's the first thing. Don't be afraid. The second thing I notice in reading Paul's letters is his deep concern for his fellow Christians. Now, it was a universalist message to the uncircumcised and the circumcised, and that's the beauty of Christianity. It's for everybody, no matter what you look like, no matter where you're from, your language. It's truly a universal faith, which was a completely radical idea when Jesus was crucified. Like, I don't think anyone had ever thought of anything like, there was nothing like that, never had been anything like that. And I love that. And so Paul was preaching to everybody. In fact, in a lot of ways, he was preaching to the Greeks a lot of the time. But even though his concern was for everybody, his heart was focused, and you see this again and again in his letters, on his fellow Christians. Titus, Timothy, how are they doing? How are you? I love you. He really cares about his brothers in the faith. He really, really does. And it's intimate and kind of raw in these letters. It's wonderful. And I think that's a model for us. We should care about everybody, but we should have a soft spot for other Christians. We should. And we don't at all. We don't at all. And that's one thing I've noticed the whole time I've been in D.C. I'm totally opposed to tribalism, particularly religious tribalism. My instinct is ecumenical. Like, we're all in this. Let's speak to everybody. That is, I'm American, very American. And that's an American idea. But I can't help but notice how the Christian church has almost specifically excluded concern for other Christians from its portfolio. I see it all the time. I'll never forget going to Iraq to cover the war in 2003 and running into a Christian. I didn't know there were Christians in Iraq. Well, 1.5 million of them, actually. It was one of the biggest and oldest Christian communities in the world. It's gone now. 1.5 million Christians in Iraq in 2003. They're about, we think, 150,000 or fewer. So that's like, I don't know, kind of qualifies as genocide, I would think. I mean, by definition, they're gone. Okay, a lot of them were murdered. Not a lot of them came here because they were excluded, specifically excluded by the Obama State Department. This was a news story at the time. So we're getting a lot of refugees from Iraq. What percentage were Christian? None. And no one said anything about it. This wasn't hidden information. I reported it at the time. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, there are a lot of great people coming. Well, okay, but if you're a Christian church, what about the Christians? The president who sent them there was a self-described Christian. But there was not one word. In 20 years, I have not heard one word of concern about what happened to all those Christians. Nobody seems to care. We should care. Not just about them, but certainly about them. Why wouldn't we? They're Christians, so are we. The Christians of Syria, never hear a word about it. Look, the world is super complicated, and anytime someone tries to reduce a conflict, say, or a rivalry in another part of the world to a bumper sticker, you know that person's lying. Because the closer you get to anything, whether it's a country or a marriage, or any human interaction, the closer you get, the more you know, the more you understand it's indescribably complex, and you can never fully know the truth. Okay? I'm only suggesting that one factor that Christians use to assess the behavior of their government and other governments ought to be the treatment of Christians. It ought to be. Why is it not? So if there's a conflict in, say, Syria, and you're being told by everybody in the media that the bad guy in that conflict is Bashar al-Assad, I'm sure he's bad. I'm not endorsing the guy, never met him. Glad I don't live in Damascus. On the other hand, I think one of the questions you can ask is, how are the Christians faring? Are they going to do better under Bashar al-Assad? There's a massive Christian community in Syria. There was. We funded the Islamists who killed a lot of them. We're funding the Islamists who are killing the Christians. Anyone know that? No, of course not. Churches never talk about it. That's true. Are we for that? I'm not for that. No. If the only thing I know, look, it's far away. I don't think it has anything to do with us. I don't think we should be involved. But as long as we are involved, why doesn't someone stand up and say, wait a second, we're funding the killing of Christians? No, I'm a Christian. I'm against that. How's that? Right. Let's start there. Yeah. 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 Right? The conflict between Russia and Ukraine, super complicated. I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't think there's a good guy and a bad guy. I don't think it's Churchill versus Hitler. I just don't think that. And the more I learn about it, the more I'm confused. I'm certainly not endorsing Russia. I don't live there either, never been there. But one of the guides that we as Christians should use to assess that situation is, how do Christians fare in those countries? It's totally legitimate to ask that question. Is it easier to be a Christian in Russia or Ukraine? They're forcing us to pick. I mean, I kind of happily live in a world where I don't have to pick. I don't know, they're foreign countries far away. They're not America. I'm not that interested, but they're making us be interested. So now that we're required to be interested and pay for the war, why doesn't some Christian minister stand up and say, is it easier to be a Christian in Ukraine or Russia? One of those countries just arrested a bunch of priests and shut down churches with political police and the army. It wasn't Russia. I raised that question at a Christian gathering and people scowled at me. Really? They're arresting priests? I don't need to know more, actually. Well, they had bad opinions. Well, okay. So? I have bad opinions. I don't want to be arrested. Bad opinions are not grounds for arrest, sorry. And moreover, the gut-level reaction of Christians to the arrests of Christian clergy should be horror. Period. Period.